distinguished guests, esteemed faculty members, and ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I welcome all of you to the CITE Research Symposium 2025, organized by the Center for Information Technology in Education, Faculty of Education, the University of Hong Kong. My name is Perry Tian, and I am a PhD student at the faculty. I'm very happy to be your MC for this beautiful morning. First, it is my great privilege to introduce our conference general co-chairs who work tirelessly to bring this event to fruition. Everyone, please join me in welcoming the Director of CITE, Professor Gary Huang.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CITES, and welcome to CITES again for those who have been supporting us in CITES before. And so let me just say a few words to just warm up the stage, and hopefully we can have a very good sessions in the upcoming 2 days. So this is indeed my privilege to welcome you to CITES 2025 at the University of Hong Kong. Today we gather as a global community, united by a shared visions to harness the power of emerging digital technologies to transform education and ultimately humanity. This year's theme, Touching Hearts and Inspiring Minds with Emerging Digital Technologies, reminds us that technology is not just about efficiencies and innovations. It is about connection. It's about creating tools that inspire curiosity, foster empathy, and empower individuals to reach their fullness potential. So consider the incredible advancements we have witnessed recently. Gen AI is not only assisting educators, but also helping students with learning differences find their voices. Immersive AR and VR technologies as well are transporting learners to ancient civilizations or distant galaxies, sparking wonders and creativity. However, as we embrace these technologies, we must also address their challenges. Gen AI, for instance, raises critical questions about bias, ethics, the potential for misuse. It's our responsibility to ensure that these tools are developed and deployed in ways that promote fairness, transparencies, and human dignity. So as we explore these technologies over the next 2 days, let us remember our responsibility to design with intention, to innovate with compassion, and to ensure that these tools serve as bridges, not barriers, to human connections and growth. Let us commit to addressing the challenges of Gen AI, from mitigating bias to safeguarding privacy so that it can truly inspire minds and touch hearts. In the words of this late Steve Jobs, technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with the liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing. And by the way, these are my true words, not from Gen AI, so don't worry. But our theme this year echoes to Ruby Jubilee tagline of our faculty's 40th anniversary. So with this in mind, our Center for Information Technology in Education remains committed to advancing our key missions, empowering communities, and transforming learning. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the upcoming 2 days and also your long support to our centers, of course, in this CITES Symposium. So let us strive to create a future where technology not only inspires minds, but also touches heart. So thank you, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring symposium this year with us. Thank you very much.
Next, let's kickstart today's first keynote session. The session will be chaired by Professor Lukas Liu. And everyone, please give a big hand to Professor Liu.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm more than pleased here today to welcome Professor Roger Azevedo to our University of Hong Kong and our CITES to be our very first keynote speaker of today. Professor Roger Azevedo is the Pegasus professor from the School of Modeling, Simulation, Training. I hope I get the order right. I just look at it online. From the University of Central Florida. And I think for a lot of us who has been in the field of educational technology, learning sciences, cognitive science have known Roger's name very, very well through his, I think, 2 decades of work in cognition, metacognition, self-regulated learning, etc. And particularly in terms of thinking about how humans interact with machines with advanced technologies. If you have taken a quick look at the program of these 2 days, you'll probably notice that there are about maybe 70% of the sessions are about AI or in one way or another in its relationship with education. Although we kind of, disagree on its promises and challenges. But I think there's one thing that we all would agree, which is we're living in a very interesting period of time. And this time is all about changes and complexities. To navigate through these complexities and change, I think we probably need a lot of wisdom. And luckily today, we have Roger here with just a deep amount of knowledge, both from, I think, theoretical perspective and practical perspective about how we can go through this period of time with metacognition and self-regulated learning. So with no further ado, let's welcome Professor Roger Azevedo.
All right, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for your wonderful and kind introduction. Also, thank you, Dr. Nancy Lau, for the invitation. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you to share some new ideas that we have. In terms of the human digital twin, as we've seen evolution in terms of the field of AI in education. And before I start my talk, I'd like to acknowledge a lot of the funding agencies that support our research at home at UCF. So a lot of them are basically either federal institutions such as IES, NIH, NSF, also some military, the FCOM, for example. We are also funded by several Canadian institutions still. And also we are pleasure to have my colleague here also and collaborate and good friend, Inge Molinar. So we do have a Cello project, which is funded by Early and the Jacobs Foundation. So I'd like to start off with the human-machine symbiosis, because the evolution of how intelligent humans and intelligent machines interact with each other, there's got to be some kind of symbiotic relationship between humans and machines. And so that's kind of the symbiotic component in terms of human-machine. And also the human digital twin. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a new line of work, which extends some of the work that we've done with MetaTutor and other AI technologies. So the human digital twin, why would a human want to have a human digital twin of themselves? So that's kind of, we're going to take you a little through the journey. I'm going to skip a lot of the details because a lot of the details are not only very detailed, but they're also being still worked out in terms of what should be inside the human digital twin. How does the human digital twin interact with other humans? How does it learn? How does it modify itself, etc.? And of course, this is all rooted in extensive work that we've done over the years, close to 30 years now, in terms of metacognition and self-regulated learning. What does that mean for the human and for the machine and for both of them together? Okay. So in terms of an overview, yes, so part of this work, obviously situating within the context that we're dealing with a lot of educational workforce challenges. So part of this is the human digital twin to facilitate that, obviously focusing on the education component today. Given the conference, its focus is on the human digital machine and symbiosis. And then basically, can we have human digital twins that really are going to advance the science of learning? Because sometimes we have to remind people, depending on what conference we go to, that yes, when we build technologies, they're based on psychological theories and models of how humans learn, think, reason, etc. They're not based on intuition, okay? So, and then I'm going to spend quite a bit of time in terms of what is this conceptualization of human digital twins, or HDTs. Sorry for a lot of acronyms that are going to be thrown at you. So designing, developing, testing, and then how do we implement them in real life? What are the roles? Okay, and the roles always is not to replace the human, never. Okay, this is technology for good. Okay, so it's about augmenting what we as humans need. So augmenting the inefficiencies of, if you will, of being a human. Like I have limited attention span, so can the human digital twin augment my ability to pay attention to more things or to do this better? Okay, and then we're really going to focus on, in order to build those digital twins, is that we're focusing on multimodal, multi-channel data that some of us have been doing for years, right? So we collect eye tracking data, physiology, facial expressions of emotions, behavior. Okay, concurrent verbalizations. How do we take that? Because that is going to be one of the major data sources for how we feed this data into a human digital twin, so that it then becomes a partner with us, or a teammate, or a collaborator. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about the architecture of that, and I'll give you some examples. So the examples that we've been working with that have been funded by several organizations, including our university. So our university is in the process of hiring 40 new faculty members in computer science, engineering, medicine, education, learning sciences, and we've reached half of that goal, okay, to actually basically focus on the human digital twin, because these are all the different disciplines that we need. And then also we focus a lot basically on K-12 and healthcare. I'll give you some examples of that. And then we'll finish off with what are some of the open challenges and questions that we have, and perhaps future directions. And this is why it's exciting to be here, to also hear what you are doing so that we can have a better understanding and hopefully lead to collaborations. So fitting this within the national context, at least the US context for now, the National Science Foundation, right? So the human digital twin concept really fits the 5 big ideas of AI as coming from NSF, is that these digital twins should have a perception, they should be able to hear, see, feel, and think. They have representational capabilities and reason. They should be able to represent tasks. What parts of the world do they need to? What parts of the human do they need to represent and reason about? They should be capable of learning, right, from data. And from here today, I'm going to focus on the use of multimodal, multi-channel data to actually feed the human digital twin. But it should also be able to generate synthetic data, right? Data that has never been captured. Can you do that on the fly using AI capabilities? It should also be able to engage in some kind of natural interaction, okay? And the natural mean, what does that mean in terms of interacting naturally with a human? Can it talk? Can it converse? Can it recognize? Can it reason? And then more importantly, more challenging is, can it actually adopt cultural, okay, conventions and societal conventions? And then from a societal impact, again, we're doing this for the good of humanity, okay? Never to replace, but to augment what humans can do, okay? So that's within the national context, at least, and why the digital twins we're kind of at this crossroads in many, many different disciplines. There have been some major challenges and advances in AI and ed, learning analytics, ed sci, computer vision, data science. And I think it's all culminating to a point where we can actually make lots of advances. I still remember being a grad student, right? At McGill, for example, we're developing intelligent tutoring system. Well, that was a theme at the time. It's like, okay, and we've done that, and you know, some of it has had a great impact, algebra, math, etc. But that's still traditional, right? We're reaching a point now where we can actually make some really significant advances, if you will, in terms of accelerating that progress in terms of technology. And then the thing is, how will it impact humans? So this also indicates that we're dealing with educational and training issues where AI play a role, right? We're still obsessed with 21st century skills. What does that mean? How do we train the future generation? Of course, our focus on self-regulation, which has a lot to do with 21st century skills and our also workforce development, right? I mean, we want humans basically that can engage in critical thinking, that they can engage in metacognition, okay, that have good strategies, that know how to regulate their emotions when they are faced with confusion and frustration. How do we do that? There's also some metaphors, right? Human AI teaming, we see a lot of that, human AI collaboration, human machine symbiosis, and also, as you'll hear later this afternoon, from Inge will be the hybrid human AI interaction. So that's, you know, work by her and our other colleagues and collaborators, Sanna Jarvala and several others. So that'll be interesting. So the question is, how does the human digital twin fit within that hybrid human AI concept? Adaptive intelligent systems, we have some beautiful new opportunities to really advance these intelligent systems. And, you know, I've been obsessed since I was a grad student with what do we mean by a system that is intelligent? Who is intelligent? Is it the human is intelligent? Is the machine is intelligent? What does intelligence mean? Does that mean that you, the machine, knows exactly what I need at this point in time, okay? And now you're able to deliver that. So you're really addressing my individual learning needs right now. But the question is, what is it going to take to do that? How much data do we need to collect? And if you have a human digital twin who's potentially ubiquitously available and accessible to you 24/7, wherever it may be. It may be embodied, disembodied, it may be on your phone. We're working with our colleagues in engineering where the human digital twin of yourself who lives on your phone, it can feel, it can think, it can hear what you're doing. So does that mean that it has a better model and can address your individual needs much more precisely? Conceptual theoretical frameworks, we have, you know, opportunities to advance learning, instruction, and teaching, and also methodologic tools, right? So we think about the human digital twins, not just kind of an AI system to help augment the human, okay, but it's also a research platform. Because for those of us in the field of modeling and simulation, right, we're always envious. I see my engineering colleagues, well, you know, I can develop a new turbine for an airplane, and I could, it's like, well, I want the equivalent as a psychologist. Instead of a turbine, I want a human digital twin that I can also experiment. Okay, if I give this human digital twin more knowledge, will it solve the problem quicker? Okay, if I give this human self-regulatory skills and knowledge, right, how does it evolve over time? Okay, can it solve this problem? So that's kind of a little bit in terms of the context. Why again? So it's this evolution of human digital integration, especially as we move into more complex educational ecosystems. It's not just now, oh, I have a game and I bring the game into the classroom, et cetera. Now there's ecosystems. So how are those ecosystems ubiquitously accessible to the human and continuously to collect data on the human for the sickness of good, to understand the human, to better augment what the human can do? The concept of human digital twins is metacognitive scaffolds. Okay, so I'll be talking during my talk, I'll use metacognition, and I apologize, metacognition and self-regulation interchangeably. Okay, so don't hold me to that. And then we're also talking about this as more dynamic, from just very simple learner profiles to a real dynamic interaction with the human digital twin. Technological capabilities, pedagogical applications. There's still a lot of work in terms of pedagogy. What does it mean to teach? Okay, who's doing the teaching? Is it the human? Is it the digital twin? Is it both? How are they teaching each other? And then really this vision of symbiotic relationships so that can really coexist together. Again, emphasizing that it's complementary intelligence, not replacement, okay? And it's about augmenting the human capabilities while preserving their identity and hopefully their culture, societal challenges, and also their personal agency. So we can go on in terms of, you'll see another acronym which I'm going to throw out is cognition, affect, metacognition, or motivation. So these processes are really important. So CAM, what are the components of effective human digital twins, which I don't really have too much time to go into because that will get into the architecture. That there are technical foundations that are working with AI colleagues, computer science and engineering, and several industry in our Orlando area, mostly drawing from a lot of the military work that has been done, because they have been basically is what we want to do is, can you take the algorithms, for example, the technology that you've developed for military purposes and make it useful for humans, for human purpose, for education and training and learning. And then, yes, these are, so what do we see is kind of as a high level to start off is, can we develop human digital twins? Can they teach humans, but can the humans also teach them? Because the human wants, we want humans to teach them about who they are as self-regulated learners. Can we train them, all right? If we train them, can we give them access, if you will, of our multimodal, multi-channel data? And of course, we get into bias and ethics and privacy issues, okay, that I'm not sweeping under the rug, but I'm not really going to emphasize here. And then the question is, can they model back? Because part of this is, there is no system now that actually can model who you are as a self-regulated being and actually model for you, right? So anytime we see someone or we get feedback, regardless of our learning, et cetera, it's always through somebody else's eyes, a teacher, a parent, a peer, right? Well, why can't I not, my human digital twin, model who I am so I can see it? So it's almost like you confronting your own data, if you will, and then I can interrogate it. Can they learn? Can they reason? Can they problem solve? Can they think? Can they understand? And what does that look like, right? And can they do that in, it could be an immersive environment, it can be on the phone, it can be in the classroom, imagine the projection. So a lot of our colleagues in the School of Modeling, Simulation and Training are using augmented reality. So you have human digital twin, imagine being right here in front of you. Okay, explain to me the reason why I'm not understanding and learning and problem solving this algebra problem is because these are the issues that you have to work on. And I may say, turn around to it and say, okay, well, that's interesting because now you are me, if you will. Well, then model for me what those processes and skills that you just told me that I should embody, model it for me, okay? And then the question is, the really, really high hallmark for AI is, can they then reflect and explain and then hopefully self-modify themselves as we are self-modifying, okay? And of course, on the right-hand side, you have a lot of different issues that, of course, we need not to forget about, okay? So in terms of this, we're coming kind of at a crossroads where we're integrating, especially with our work, is self-regulation, pedagogical agents, work that we've done in the past, multimodal data and AI. We have noticed that there are so the impetus for this is that there are some limitations in terms of the work on pedagogical agents. We've done that work. Gautam Biswas, our colleague, James Lester, there's a whole area in AI and education. Yes, these are great. The agents have been there. They've served their purpose, but we can do better than that. And the question is, can we accelerate some of that work that has been done? How do we model the dynamics of SRL that some of us at least are, obsessed with, okay? Because we can capture that with multimodal, multi-channel data. But then the question is, how do we model that in a human digital twin, okay, so that it can understand and adapt to scaffolding? So we see this as a lot of embodiment of self-regulatory knowledge and skills in human digital twins. There are many, many application areas. Our lab and our collaborators focus most on K-12 and education and military, where we have other colleagues who are working in the areas of urban planning, cybersecurity, gaming, aviation, et cetera, okay? And so if we start now at where are we in terms of AI systems? Just to give you a very, very short snippet, because what we're trying to do is accelerate the work that has been done, that is kind of captured here in 60 different screenshots in terms of AI systems that do exist. We have a top right, we have Metatutor. We've been doing this for 15 years. We've seen the challenge. It has contributed immensely in terms of cognition, metacognition, but the agents were very two-dimensional, not much interactivity, so they can't facially emote the fact that, oh my gosh, you're like actually reading the wrong stuff, right? There's no way of doing that. The intelligence is limited. On the bottom right is Sue Lajra, my former advisor from McGill, okay, who's built this environment called BioWorld. BioWorld actually had very limited also AI in terms of what it could provide in terms of helping clinicians become better clinicians. The middle, Crystal Island, is work that we continue doing with our colleagues, James Lester at NC State. And so, yes, you have NPCs, but it's a completely different approach to building self-regulation. That approach is more game-based learning environment. You're the learner, you're placed on this island, there's been a biological outbreak, and you have to figure out how to solve this, okay? And the question is, there's not much scaffolding. You really are on your own. The only scaffolding we do is constrain what you can and cannot do and who you can and cannot talk, okay? The bottom left is Betty's Brain, by our colleague Gautam Biswas. Completely different approach to self-regulation. Here is, the system doesn't teach the student. Okay, it's a student that has to learn. It's learning by the teaching paradigm. You learn everything you can about ecology, and then you teach Betty by building her brain, which is the nodes and the concepts that you see there. Okay, and then for colleagues, for example, at CMU, like well, now he's been at NC State for a while. Nobuo Matsuda, right? Sim student, completely different approach. The student is teaching algebra to the environment, to sim student. Okay. And then we have other environments like G-Study. So the question is, there are many, many, many different, and of course, Inga's done a lot of work also in this area. Many of our colleagues, this is just a snapshot that we included in the Handbook of AI in Education that came out in 2023. And so many different approaches and flavors of what it means to have AI in these systems are designed to build and train metacognition, self-regulation, but so that we see human digital twin as kind of the next iteration of these kinds of systems. Of course, built into all these systems and built into the system or any human digital twin is we have to basically make sure that we adopt some aspect of self-regulation. This is just a snippet of some of the models and frameworks that exist. Okay, so the question is, well, the human digital twin has to have metacognitive capabilities. Okay, well, do we use metacomprehension, which is at the top right? Okay, or is it the Mellon Gracer's, emotion affect dynamics? Is it Klaus Scher's combinational affective processes? Does it have to have emotional regulation capabilities, which is the bottom center here by James Gross? Or what we have been using for many, many, many years is the Winnie and Hadwin model of self-regulated learning, because it treats self-regulation as a process as opposed to perceptions. Or is it, for example, the Yarvala and Hadwin's SSRL model? Okay, because if the human digital twin is going to be interacting with you as a human, then it's some aspect of it has to be some kind of social. So the question becomes, which of these models, or is it a hybrid of these models that also will extend the work that we do in terms of human machine symbiosis when we think about human digital twins? To give you an idea, now we're getting into the data. So yes, it needs to be theoretically driven and have some kind of theory. Okay, and so this is an example for those of you who have seen multimodal, multi-channel data. This is actually an example of one of our projects that was unfortunately terminated a month ago, exactly to the day. This was funded by NIH, and this is a project where the student actually develops a virus. Okay, and so what you're seeing is he's fully instrumented. You're hearing the current think aloud protocol. We're getting physiology, verbalization, recordings, all of this labeled data. Okay, and it gets to a point where, guys, actually, if you will, for lack of a better verb, he unleashes the virus he's created on the continental US, and he gets to see with the data visualizations how many people are getting infected, how many people are incubated, how many people are dying, etc. Because now he's supposed to be making inferences about the nature of the virus and population dynamics. So if he's dropped the same virus, for example, in New York, you're going to have a very different behavior than you dropped it in Portland. Okay. And then the idea is to drop AI agents that would actually have public health to see how public health policies would actually eradicate. Okay. So one question is here, the reason showing you this is that we collect rich multimodal data. So imagine a 60-minute interaction, 3 scenarios that the student is developing. We're collecting you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of data points from these. And just to give you an idea about the accuracy is the eye tracker. We're collecting 250 hertz. That means 200 data points from your eyes per second. Now imagine that times 60 minutes. The physiological data, back. Yeah, the physiological data that we're collecting here, that's 30 hertz. So that's 30 data points. Eye tracking, 200 data points, verbalization is about 1 hertz, et cetera. So one of our biggest issues is how do we take this temporally unfolding data, okay, and basically compress it, if you will, temporally align it so we can understand the cognitive, metacognitive processes. This is some of the data that would be fed, okay, given this example, regardless of the example, into the human digital twin. So that's one of the big challenges. And here's the bigger challenge, right? Because from this student alone, for example, we collect tons of physiological signals. We have various behavioral metrics that come out, okay, mostly from the log files, et cetera. Okay, cognitive, metacognitive, affect, and motivational indicators that are important. The question is, yes, so while we could collect this, the next challenge is which one of these do we feed into human digital twin, and why are we feeding that to the human digital twin, and what are the challenges, not only from a psychological perspective, learning science perspective, but then also from a computational perspective. And let's not forget, if our human digital twins are supposed to coexist with us, then the question is, what are the contextual aspects or information that we also need to capture within the human digital twin ecosystem? Okay. This all relates to when we first got funding, especially when it started from the university's president, we came up with this framework for the meta-human because, while we work in K-12, the yellow balls that you see on the right-hand side are also the other disciplines that some of my colleagues in modeling and simulation and across that work in this area. And so some of the questions he asked is, well, what kind of data do we, of this multimodal data that I just showed you, which ones, which data channels do we share with a human digital twin? And why? How is a human digital twin and a human supposed to interact and communicate, right? How do we measure success that this human digital twin is actually helping me as a human become a better human, a better self-regulator, et cetera, right? What are the roles of real world and immersive environments? And of course, fundamentally, what is the role of AI in this entire process? Now, if we take a specific example, if we think about human digital twins and STEM learning, for example, right? Well, one idea is that human digital twins are digital replicas. But we have to be very careful, and we can spend 10 hours here on a replica. What does it mean to be a replica? At this stage, okay, a replica does not mean, and there's a lot of biomedical research that actually focuses on digital twins as a replica because it contains your genome. Okay, at this point, we're not really talking about that, even though that may be interesting. We're focusing more on the cognitive architecture in terms of what it should be inside, if you will, the brains of the human digital twin. So replica is a word, I should have put it in quotes, because what do we mean by a replica? How much replication does it should have? Okay, and what should it have? And then how do we decide on what do we put inside, if you will, the human digital twin, right? What's important? What's not important? What does it depend on? And most importantly, is it eventually going to be able to self-regulating itself without human intervention? Okay, and could it potentially engage in self-modification? Because if we think about metacognition, that is the ultimate, right? An adaptive human, right, is one that is able to understand who they are and self-modify. The question is, what are you going to self-modify? And if you think about cognitive architectures like SOAR and ACTAR, self-modification, of course, you have to use a production rule to be able to use that, right, at a computational level. And then what role does multimodal, multi-channel they play in the design, modeling, and simulation of the human digital twins? And so here are some questions that we are still, again, grappling with, right? What features of being a human do they need to be modeled and simulated, right? Is it my goal structure, right? Is it my gender, ethnicity, my culture, medical history? In some cases that I'm going to show you, there is one aspect that medical history is extremely important, okay? But I really want to focus, especially today, is on the right-hand side, which really relates to metacognition, self-regulation, right? What aspects of metacognition, motivation, emotions, and social processes do we need to model or have our embody in our human digital twin? And then what else? What else are we missing? Okay, and some of the work that we do, especially with patients in end-of-life scenarios in healthcare, right? We're basically trying to train clinicians to be more empathetic, right? It's like, oh, because the typical thing is like, oh yeah, you got stage 4, and you got 3 more months to live, and that's it, and now go deal with your life. It's like, oh, wow, is that how we're going to treat humans? Okay, so how are we going to train the next generation of clinicians to be much more empathetic, okay? On some of the work that I will also show you, which is on pediatric acute illnesses, okay? So in Florida, for example, in the summer, unfortunately, is gonna happen, is that many of us have pools, right? We have children, and many children drown in their pools, okay? So they're carted off to a hospital to be resuscitated, which is the last move. If you do not resuscitate a child, the child dies, okay? So the question is, well, how can you be much more sensitive, empathetic when you're delivering such devastating news to parents, okay? So now from a theoretical, a computational aspect, this is just one approach, okay? So in terms of what we're trying to do is take the SRL theory and computational modeling of metacognition that exists. So many of you probably are familiar with ACTAR and SOAR and Clarion. These are computational tools. But there are also, believe it or not, some metacognitive architectures. So our idea is to take basically and integrate a lot of the work that I just showed you, the Winnie and Hadwin's model of self-regulation with two existing metacognitive architectures that exist that are shown in the top right. That's Cox Mitka, and then the bottom is Caro's Karina. We obviously have to emphasize the 4 phases of Winnie and Hadwin's model, okay? And also look at and be able to integrate the dynamics and temporally unfolding CAM processes, okay, that are related to monitoring and regulation. Other things that we want our metacognitive architecture to capture are in the last 2 bullets. So things like contextual factors and variables. So if it is a student, let's say, who's working to learn about, let's say, stoichiometry, okay, well, they need to have access to text and diagrams. So going back to, for example, to Rich Mayer's work, so some aspect of that and having a mental model is going to be important. What aspect of the simulation or immersive environment, or it can be an intelligent tutoring system, needs to be captured, okay? And then more challenging is going to be the integration of affect, motivational, social processes into a human digital twin. And that's other work that some of our colleagues are doing, and this is based on some recent work by Mimi Bong and Gross. So, so taking that, the question is, so here's one potential. So this is what we're trying to experiment with, okay? So you saw that other student developing virus, right? So here's another student, typical setup, experimental setup, is as this student is learning, the student is actually learning about viruses and bacteria using Crystal Island. They are generating in real time multimodal data. That multimodal data is being fed into a human digital twin, which is on the right-hand side, okay? And of course, there's gonna be obviously multiple humans in the loop along with AI algorithms are going to try to interpret what are these not only scientific reasoning processes, but also self-regulatory processes that this user is engaging in, that is being captured and categorized and basically embodied. And then the question becomes, at what point does the human digital twin also feed information back to the human learner so that they can adapt in real time, okay? So you see this kind of as a continuous cycle. The types of information that they would feed back to the human learner is going to depend on the situation. Are we seeing this scenario where the human digital twin is scaffolding the student? Are they tutoring the student? Are they trying to collaborate, or are they a team member, okay? So a lot of this has happened. So what we have been doing is trying to basically figure out, okay, and we've been doing this for quite a number of years. In fact, this is actually Michelle Taub, who's one of my former grad students who, my gosh, it's been a while. So this was back when I was at North Carolina State University in the psych department, when she was still a grad student and postdoc of mine. She just actually got promoted to associate professor at UCF. So this has been a while. We were already playing with the idea, we're reviving this, is an idea that imagine if she is representing a learner, right? And then we have Nick here, was my former student. The student, imagine, could be one of us, an expert in self-regulation, a teacher, an expert teacher, et cetera. He's also instrumented. What we want to figure out is, while he's having access, okay, we're giving him, and of course, ideally, of course, he will not be sitting next to her, obviously, or talking to her. Don't talk to her, okay? Is as she is generating, yes, and you can look, they're very thrilled about doing this, very high level, universal picture. I'm just kidding. Right, so as she's generating her multimodal data, okay, we're going to now pan is to Nick, and we're interested is, imagine Nick is now the teacher. We want to understand, if the teacher, then what inference, and he was going to teach the human digital twin, what inferences is he making about her real-time multimodal data, okay? And then that data can eventually feed the human digital twin, okay? So there's an entire process here. So if she looks confused, okay, and we know she's confused, we have ground truth, Well, in real time, what is he looking at to try to understand why she's confused? Is he looking at her facial expression? Is he looking at the screen recording? Because maybe the confusion is based on the fact that she's being assessed and she doesn't really understand because she hasn't learned properly, okay, or not enough. So we see this as so this evolution of this work that we're still doing is basically being projected into this new framework that we are developing with our colleagues in computer science and engineering as the psychologist, is as we are developing the human digital twin, which is at the top left, right, there is potentially a pedagogical interaction down here. So we have a learner who is in a black t-shirt, and we have a teacher. The teacher's generating multimodal data, and that could be a tutor, that can be a parent. The students generating multimodal data. We're trying to understand how they're interacting. And part of this is that there is going to be at least one human who's a researcher, someone like us, okay, watching all this data unfold and actually categorizing, classifying. What we're missing there is, of course, AI algorithms that can also help the researcher, right? And all this information basically is being fed into the human digital twin. Okay, and then of course we would have to test the human digital twin. So this is, we're kind of at the novice, at the beginning stages of actually testing this paradigm. We've been doing this with physical tasks, and the idea is then, to obviously move into more, if she's doing using some kind of learning technology to learn about STEM, for example. Okay, so in terms of the framework, yes, we have to make distinctions that what parts of metacognition should this thing have, right? Declare procedural knowledge, be able to plan, monitor the metacognitive phases, right? We know that humans have limited self-awareness. So that question is, how do we detect limited self-awareness? How would we embody that into a human digital twin? Okay, how do we assess? All right, can the human digital twin at some point engage in self-assessment like we do as humans, right? In terms of, when you think about metacognitions, like, well, I've been at this task for about 15 minutes and you know what? I still don't understand anything about it. Okay, so what do I do at that point in time as a human? Okay, and then of course, a lot of the work also with data science back at UCF and other approaches is to kind of, how do we make the thinking that both the human and the human digital twin is engaging in, making those visible through some kind of computer interface, whether it's an open learner model, so Judy Kay's work, or some other kind of data visualization. And there's a whole approach that we're doing in terms of AI-driven metacognitive interventions, that just-in-time, how do we manage the just-in-time interventions? How does it adapt to developmental readiness? The transparency between reasoning behind the suggestions, like how do we actually assess that, for example, the suggestion recommendations of scaffolding, and that eventually the human digital twin will give a human are accurate, okay, and ethical in nature, okay? And so, yes, and then many, I'm also trying to be mindful of time here. Multi-layered framework for human digital twin that we're working out with our colleagues and also some industry partners who are doing a lot of this work. So Sortec is actually, they already, so when back in at Carnegie Mellon, when Alan Newell developed SOAR architecture back in the late 80s, so his legacy has continued. So we're trying to use the SOAR architecture for some of this work, the data sources, integration, and of course, the technical challenges and current limitations. Before I give you some real examples, there are computational requirements, right, in terms of using some of these cognitive architectures and metacognitive architectures. How do we balance modeling complexity versus interpretability? And more importantly is, because we do collect multimodal, multi-channel data, in addition to other data, is how do we address the volume, the velocity, the veracity, and the variety of these multimodal data when implementing and also scaling up, okay? It's one thing to do this in a laboratory setting, but then how does that operate in terms of, imagine that you are all students and you have your digital twin and I'm playing the professor, okay, or you're at home or you're at a coffee shop, etc. Okay, how do we kind of continue that? We have trying to align the Winnie's model with some aspects of the architecture, okay, in terms of, you think about the 4 phases, which is the first row of Winnie and Hadron's model, with the kinds of components in terms of modules, if you will, okay? And then also the description of, this is a kind of the last column is a high-level description of potentially what a human digital twin, the roles and what it can be playing for in terms of the students. So interpreting the context okay, identifies the learner needs because it knows about you, etc. Okay, and could potentially activate some tag schemas because, for example, you may be learning how to solve double-digit multiplication problems, and we know because we can extract all the work that's been done in educational learning sciences and cognitive science, for example, in terms of problem solving. Okay, if we go into dig and peel the onion a little more, we can actually have more components because now we're comparing the Winnie and Hadwin model with Zimmerman and colleagues' social cognitive theory model. So there's a lot of overlap, even though they were using some different words. Okay. And then on the right-hand side, you notice the font is very small, and that's because, just to give you an example of the types of, again, as the volume, right, the veracity and the variety of multimodal data traces that we can collect potentially, that's just a snippet from the human digital twin and the student. Okay. So kind of as we're kind of rounding off here, I wanted to show you some of the projects that we're working on where the human digital twins. So the top right here, okay, this is actually one of my postdocs, Megan Wheatbush. We actually have, not sound too scary as people are leaving. So here's Megan, that's the real Megan, so we hope. Okay, we have digitized Megan, okay, and we're experimenting so you can have somebody live that is brought into the Dr. hologram, which is a view box that's hypovolumetric. The only thing we cannot do now is we cannot, basically for medical purposes, we cannot actually palpate and physically manipulate, okay? So there are colleagues who are working on haptics, so you can actually, so this could be Megan. So if you think about clinical implications as a patient, imagine Megan was just pre-diagnosed as pre-diabetic, right? And if that's a digital twin of her, imagine her interrogating and talking to her digital twin and asking, if I don't make any changes to my lifestyle and my eating, et cetera, my nutrition, what's going to happen to me 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? Is she going to confront herself where maybe she's blind, okay, or missing a limb because it had to be amputated, okay? From a teacher's perspective, this could be a novice teacher, okay? And it's an embodiment of who you are, okay? And let's say you are really having a hard time as a teacher, right, detecting your students' emotion, okay, but more importantly, actually deploying and implementing emotional regulation strategies. So imagine that is what you are talking to your digital twin about, and imagine being able to generate a scenario, okay, where you actually get to see how you would solve that scenario of potentially a student who has really poor emotional regulation strategy and you are having a really hard time. And the question is, it's modeling how you deploy those emotional regulation strategies for the student so you can learn. Okay, because otherwise you're stuck with those models that I showed you. It's like, oh, this is an interesting flow chart. It's like, what does that look like in real life? Okay, in physical therapy, we have another College of Health Profession and Sciences. This is a 3 projection wall. You don't see the third, okay, where we can have a human digital twin. The human digital twin actually could be a human digital twin of a parent because what we're simulating here is the neonatal intensive care unit, okay, where children who are just born, okay, could potentially be on the verge of dying. Okay, so it's a very high stress. We can turn on all the stressors that you would see in an actual NICU. Here's Dr. Tucker. She is the faculty, and she's teaching undergrad students how to physically manipulate, okay, physically manipulate newborns. Okay, these newborns have sensors in them, because when we figure out is as you're physically manipulating, how do we know that they're being effective? Okay, but we could have human digital twins of parents that are embodied in the wall who can actually add even more stress to what you as a clinician is supposed to do. Okay, anything to replicate, because as they say, I would rather you, kill the patient in the simulation than do that in the real world. Okay, this is about training and education. On the other hand, on the other side, you have basically you have let's say teaching chemistry, you can be teaching self-regulation to artificial agents. This other one here that we have is an ongoing project with our children's hospital. And what you are seeing is from the head of the bed. It's from the team leader. The team leader is watching the other 3 team members, and the ball that you see moving around is the eye tracking of the team leader. Okay, this is a high stress environment. They have 7 minutes to solve this case. This is a mannequin, okay, a pediatric mannequin. Okay, and so the question is, we are already collecting all the multimodal, multi-channel data. Okay, so why not basically then develop an expert emergency department human digital twin that could be anywhere in that room, whether it's against the wall, as we work with our nanotechnologies. Okay, we want to basically take these walls and make them built on nanotechnologies that can actually hear, feel, and think. Okay, and imagine now it's potentially a fourth team member that can provide expertise. Okay, or in this case, College of Nursing, right, where we're looking at standardized patients, but more importantly, this person here with the blue hat, she is the nurse practitioner expert preceptor. She is like the most highly valued teacher. Okay, these folks are very rare. Okay, and they cost a lot of money. They're in a clinical setting, okay, in a modeling simulation environment at College of Nursing. They're learning as a team to engage in an ultrasound guided task, okay, that is very precarious, that can actually damage a human, okay? The question is, what is it going to take to develop a human digital twin that can basically support these and other teams, because you're seeing just one of 10 teams that are operating at the same time. She cannot be there with them, all 10 teams at once, okay? Or, for example, you could also have it be teaching a metacognition. So in this case, where we have an embodied human digital twin with a bunch of students, and they could potentially, okay, be talking about metacognition. All right, that's a very basic model that's presented. Other work that we're doing, some industry partners on the bottom right, is a different incarnation, if you will, of human digital twin. In this case, it's a simulated learner. Okay, in this case, a simulated learner is, imagine, you know, I'm a teacher, and it's like, okay, well, create my classroom. You have all the self-regulatory profiles of my students. Create my classroom. I teach chemistry. They're in a chemistry lab, okay? And with each profile, I want to be able to actually unleash, if you will, have them all solve the problem, so I can understand why, for example, some of my students are not learning as quickly or don't understand as much. Okay, so it can be from a teacher's perspective, but also could be from a learner's perspective. Let's say, oh my gosh, you know, I'm not doing very well in this class. Okay, but I know that I have, for example, 4 peers who are really great and excelling. So why not generate who those 4 peers are, plus myself, and now, okay, model and simulate how they solve the problem versus myself. And can we then use, for example, explainative AI, where they can actually explain to me why they do it better, if you will, than I do. And what is it going to take for me to get to their level? Okay, so those are some of the projects. If we take a math teacher, all right, we have one of our county systems, Seminole County Public Schools. I've been meeting with them. Okay, they want to obviously use AI, but not just teaching AI, but they're also one of the human digital twin of a math teacher, because apparently in the US, at least in our county in Florida, okay, math teachers are rare because there are many, many issues in terms of how they're trained, right? So if we're questioning the way they're being trained, then imagine putting those math teachers in a math classroom. You can obviously ask lots of questions about the quality. So this is just kind of a snippet of basically what are some of the elements that it would take for us to create basically a human digital twin of a high school math teacher. Everything from capturing those metacognitive processes to modeling motivation, emotional regulation, the dynamics, the fidelity, if you will, ethical issues, of course, you know. Does the teacher have consent? What about the students' perceptions and biases of this? And also representing pedagogical knowledge. So these are just some of the aspects when we think about a human math teacher. And so it's kind of rounding off here. Some of the questions and challenges that we still ask, right? What is the value added of focusing on human digital twins kind of as we extend the field of AI in education, both for researchers, learners, teachers, and others to understand self-regulation and also STEM learning and non-STEM learning environments, right? Which human multimodal data channel, okay, can we use? Why are you using a human digital twin? Is because you want to predict learning, such as in SimLearners, right? Or you're hypothesizing about different processes, and so you'd like them to be basically modeled for you. Or are you going to be using it to simulate, for example, actual optimal self-regulatory processing, right? And then the question is, can we have them that can generate populations? So if you think about it as a modeling and simulation environment, that they can generate populations, if you will, of human digital twins with varying skills, both knowledge and STEM. It can also be non-STEM and self-regulatory emotions. And then the question becomes, where would they exist? Okay. There are many, many questions, okay, and challenges. How am I doing on time? Good. 5 minutes, okay. All right, this is the coffee kicks in. So many, many conceptual and theoretical challenges, okay, that, you know, the one I really want to focus on is, unfortunately, and we're still, if you look at the first bullet, the third bullet, we're still in this part of our science of learning where we're still in the descriptive. We describe what humans are doing. That's perfect. We need that, as that's the foundation. right? We collect multimodal data. We can describe, oh, they spend 5 seconds being confused, and then they transition to neutral, okay? Or look, because we can collect the eye tracking data, look, they focused on a relevant AI of information for X amount of, and then they fixated on something else. When are we going to get to the point where we can start prescribing, okay? And even more important is the prediction, okay? And this is where we see a lot of the human digital twins work. We're trying to balance between theory and data-driven approaches, right? Our theories are too high level, like that snapshot, they're too high level, okay? And they do not really tell us about the temporal dynamics. And some of us are frustrated because we can collect the temporal dynamics with multimodal data, but like, where do these two things fit in, okay, at some level? The temporal dynamics important, the synchronicity between the human digital twin. We also keep focusing on quantitative changes in SRL. If you look at all publications, right, we run statistical analysis, which are great. Now we're getting to complex dynamical systems, which it was really nice to see last week at ARA and several other conferences, okay? But we keep forgetting that some of these self-regulatory changes are also qualitative in nature. So when are we going to start capturing that, okay? And can we capture that with human digital twins? Coming up with intelligent multimodal data visualizations, whether it's open learner models, and that's for everybody, and what they look different for depending on the person is. Where does the platform look like, the computational models, and also thinking about, you know, how do we measure the impact on the acquisition, retention, use, and transfer of these skills across topics, tasks, and domains and humans. And then so future directions, yes, there are many technical challenges that we have to handle. One of them is obviously the types of data that we're collecting, right? We need to have more advanced multimodal data fusion techniques. How do we personalize and adapt at scale? That's a big issue, okay? Yeah, we can do this in the lab in very constrained environments. How do we take that into the wild, into the real world, right? And then again, also we see a lot of evolving innovation areas, whether it's human AI collaboration, teaming, or is hybrid AI intelligence, okay? And then this is gonna open up another area in measurement is basically how do we invalidate, right, these approaches, right? Well, we need more longitudinal studies. We don't really have longitudinal studies on the development of these skills. How do we compare human versus the AI-driven approaches, okay? What are the metrics? What do they look like? And then how do we come up with methods for this continuous model refinement as the human and the machine live in a symbiotic relationship? Future directions, of course, it's about democratizing personalized education through AI, obviously empowering humans, augmenting what they can do, right? How do we develop global networks that actually can collaborate across geographical boundaries, time boundaries, cultural and societal aspects of this? And yes, and so none of this work would be possible without an obviously wonderful team back home and our collaborators both at Florida, the US, and around the world. And these are just some of the universities that we work with, and I'm very grateful for their collaboration. And thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I think we have about 5 minutes before we transit to the next session. So we can probably do 2 questions.
Thank you so much, Professor. I really like your presentation. I especially like the idea to use human digital twins to understand and argument what human can do. So I have one question, because like I can see its potential in supporting like to help students in multi-level in the large classes, especially when it involves like that group work. It's impossible for teachers to monitor them like at the same time. So my question is, when they use in authentic sightings, have you ever encountered the problem of incompleteness of data? Like students may gaming around the system. And second question, sorry, what is the role of a teacher when students actually interacting with the system? Thank you very much.
Yes. No, thank you for your question. Excellent question. Yeah, so that's obviously an issue that we are aware of, right, is in the incompleteness of data. And then if we have incomplete data, then that makes our job much more harder, because how we're supposed to make accurate inferences if we have incomplete data, right? So one way to get around that or address that, not get around, because get around means that we're kind of ignoring it, is imagine that human digital twin, for example, can actually sensing that there is missing data of some type is actually then, because if it is an entity, however it's embodied, right, whether it's on your screen because the team has, let's say, a tablet, like Inga, for example, has a tablet, or it's on the wall, imagine the human digital twin actually asking for a question or using a prompt to prompt the learner individually or the team, right, to provide that information that's potentially missing, if that makes sense. So that could be one way. Then you had a second question. Oh, teacher's goal, yes. So then the question is, so I love your question because it reminds me of, I've gone into high schools where, for example, you walk in and there are 5 teachers with headphones. It looks like an air traffic controller, okay? And you have up to 60 students, high school students who are failing algebra. And you know that if they fail, they cannot go to university, right? So the question is, if we had that kind of system, then imagine that, and the teachers get tired because they're answering the same question over and over again, right? So imagine being able to automate that. So the human digital twin can basically automate some of those knowledge and skills that the students have, address that individual or that group, okay? And guess what? Because it's not gonna get tired. So then can we relegate the teachers to doing higher level aspects, okay, if that makes sense, right? Whether it's metacognitive training, for example, or strategy training, etc. Okay, and so we can alleviate the lower level strategies. Thank you.